morning, Levi. It's this day, and I wanted to talk to you about something that I finished recently. I finished playing my first Pokemon fan game for my fan game review project. It was Pokemon Infinity. The article's already up, so if you want to read it, it's in the description. It goes over like actual gameplay stuff and it goes a little bit more in depth. But today we're going to talk about the story, because the story was bonkers. If you want to play it, it is free, so if you don't want spoilers, go play it now. But otherwise, stick with me, strap in. It's going to be weird. So the plot of Pokemon Infinity, you start out as this person who wakes up with amnesia on this island region, and basically everyone doesn't really know what they're supposed to do with you or where you're from. Nobody knows or remembers anything about you, so you go around, you get your starter Pokemon, you start doing all the little gym things, and you work with Professor Thorn, who is not the professor who gives you your Pokemon, and crucially, but is basically like a scientist on dimensions and physics and whatever sciencey stuff you can say to make people believe you, and is going to try and figure out where you're from. But to do that, you got to get 3 different shards of Arcanium. These different shards are imbued with the powers of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, which gives you power over time, space, and dimensions, I think it says in the game. I don't know. It's fine. But basically, Thorn is going to use those to make a machine that can send you to a different universe, because apparently that's where you're from after doing a bunch of tests. Spoiler, not spoiler, it's fine. Throughout the game, you get a lot of dialogue where you have characters that are like, you know, computers are pretty advanced. You could probably simulate an entire universe. What we're in right now might be fully simulated. And every time the game does this, I stare at the screen like... But despite those moments, the writing is still pretty decent. That is, of course, until you get to the end of the game, which is where all the things start falling into place. You were chastised throughout the game by Team Fate, which is led by the Team Fate leader, you, who's like trying to stop you from catching these Pokemon, but you're not trying to catch these Pokemon. That's weird. We're just looking for rocks. But he shows up at the end of the game after you get all the rocks, and he's like, hey, I'm you from the future. And it's like, what? That's so crazy. That's why their name is you. That's hilarious. But basically reveals that Professor Thorn is trying to go to alternate dimensions to do sciencey stuff or whatever, and they don't really care if they destroy those dimensions because it's just one multiverse or universe in the whole scale of the multiverse. And so Professor Thorn is bad, I guess. But after a whole bunch of monologuing, Professor Thorn reveals that they are also you from even further future. So you're there with your future self, and you, and you're all having an argument about what to do with the multiverse, I guess. And eventually you get the choice. You can decide whether to fight you or Professor Thorn, who's also you and also you. But basically it doesn't matter, because at the end, Professor Thorn summons this, like, the multiverse god, who's basically Arceus, but bigger, so it's Arceus, I think is its name, and summons that, and it's like, okay, we're just gonna reset the universe, because I lost. And you might be like, wow, Asa, you're right, that is a crazy story. That's so many weird things happening. Why would they do that? Well, it gets worse, because after setting up the whole multiverse idea, the whole time travel idea, they go through painstaking lengths to set up this plot. Then they reveal, in a little cutscene with Professor Thorn, that this was all a dream. And you wake up, and you're a kid in a coma who wakes up in a hospital bed. They changed the tile set for this to make it look like a completely different game. You learn that this kid who you were playing as likes Pokemon and has a vague disease that put them in a coma, and you get the choice to either wake up and leave, or you can go back to sleep and stay in the coma forever. So basically, everything they set up doesn't matter at all. There's not actually multiverses. They're actually not you from the future. It's just you in this place that you made up in your mind, so none of it actually matters. None of the plot that they put out has any impact, of course. And they even do a line at some point, sorry fan, of like, Professor Thorn in that little dream or the little cutscene before you wake up is like, yeah, dreams are kind of unsatisfying. I feel like there's a lot of holes in the plot. And I'm like, yeah! Just because you acknowledge that the writing is bad, that does not make the writing good. It makes it even more disappointing, because you knew you had so much better you could have done and you didn't do it. So overall, Pokemon Infinity is actually a really good game, but the story made me sad, because it was kind of cool, and then they threw it all away, and then there's like post-game, if you go back to sleep, and it's like, I don't want to do this. I know I'm in a coma and it's not real and it doesn't matter. So I'm like, at that point, I gave up. It was a lot of fun to play Pokemon, because Pokemon's cool. It's a free game. It's totally worth being free. It's totally worth a play, but that ending, it was a real bummer. Anyway, Levi, like I said, if you want to read the article, I've linked it in the description, where I also have some other articles that are not really that interesting, but you can look at those if you want. But otherwise, I am going to start on a new Pokemon game. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments, because I really don't know that many. I'm thinking about doing Infinite Fusion next, because that's the popular one right now, or at least it was like a couple months ago, and I think it'll be fun. But if you have any suggestions, leave them below, and Levi, I will probably see you today.